Hi, welcome to the Hawaii Real Estate Report. I'm Scott Sakata.
And I'm Jeff Orig.
Today our guest is Abe Lee, broker and owner of Abe Lee Realty. Aside from his brokerage company, Abe also teaches and offers classes through Abe Lee seminars. We'll talk about a very sensitive subject today, and that's foreclosures.
Abe, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I came to Hawaii from Korea when I was 8 years old in 1956. Went to Lunalilo Elementary School and went to University High. Went to University of Hawaii, got a bachelor's degree in Asian studies, got my insurance license, got a real estate license, got my master's degree in education, and I've had my license since 1974. And I've been developing, teaching classes, and I have wonderful real estate agents that work with me.
Oh, great. Okay, this may sound like a very basic question, but what is a foreclosure?
A foreclosure occurs when someone that borrows money from a bank cannot make the payments. After the first month, the bank collection department will call you up, and let's say it's me, I'm in default. And they'll say, Mr. Lee, this is so-and-so from XYZ Bank. You're behind on your payments. When are you going to make your payments? And if I tell them I'm really sick, I just got out of the hospital, they'll go, so when are you going to make your payments? You know. So I don't mean to say they're cold, but they have a job.
Right.
And that their job is to collect. And if they can't collect, then they foreclose. So basically, if you can't pay, they'll either go through a short sale or they'll go through foreclosure. And they have other options as well in how to handle the situation.
So after the 30 days, at what point will the bank decide, okay, we're going to put you in foreclosure?
Well, after 30 days, I think they'll give you a little more breathing room. Okay. And I think after 60 days, then they'll start to take action. And if they go through the foreclosure process, there's actually two options that the bank has. Mm-hmm. And one is called a judicial foreclosure, and the other is called a non-judicial foreclosure.
Which is going to be my next question. What's the difference between the two?
Sure. Let me walk you through a judicial foreclosure first. Let's say I'm in default the second month. The bank employee goes, Abe's a deadbeat. He's not going to pay. And I maybe told him about loss of job, my wife divorcing me, and she makes more money than me or whatever. So the bank then will hire an attorney, and they'll file papers at the courts if they're going judicial, because they got to go to the court system. So the judge will then order a complaint to be filed against me. So some man that's usually semi-retired or retired will come looking for me with a clipboard for me to sign that I received the documents, and he'll serve me. Once I receive those papers, and it'll say, Plaintiff XYZ Bank, Defendant Abraham Lee, I've been served. Now the courts will then start the foreclosure process. The courts will then select a commissioner. Mm-hmm. And a commissioner is either an attorney, historically they were attorneys, and now a lot of realtors are foreclosures commissioners. So the commissioner will call me up and say, Mr. Lee, I'm the commissioner, and I'm going to control the property from now on. If you have any rental income, I get the rents. If you have any payments to make, I get the payments. So basically, that commissioner is an officer of the court that has controlled the property. I no longer have control over that property because judicially, the law says they have control. She'll do open houses if I let her, 2 weekends. Then they'll have a courthouse auction. It's always at noon at the courthouse steps on the corner of Halikawila and Punch Bowl, I believe, right across Restaurant Row. And anybody that wants to bid on that property will then show the check to the commissioner. It has to be a cashier's check for 10% of the anticipated purchase price. So if they think my house is worth $400,000, that they're going to buy it at, and let's say it's worth really $550,000, they have to show a check for $40,000 to the commissioner. So now everybody that showed a check will now have the chance to bid. So the commissioner will open the bidding up and say, okay, what am I bid? And usually there's no upset price, which means there's no starting price. Mm-hmm. Somebody could start off at $1,000 or $100,000. And usually, they're reasonable in their starting bid, probably $100,000, $200,000. Then they keep on going up till nobody else is bidding. And let's say the highest bid is $450,000. Commissioner, just like in the movies, will say, okay, going once, going twice, going 3 times, sold. But it's not really sold because there's a court confirmation hearing. And a month later, usually, from the courthouse auction, there's a court confirmation hearing where the judge then will say, is there anyone else that wants to bid on this property? And then from then on, someone might say, oh, I want to bid. So they go out into the hallway and they start the bidding over again, but it is at 5% higher than what it sold bid at the courthouse steps. So it was 450,000. It's 5% higher.
Okay.
So they start at 450.
Okay. Well, we'll continue this right after the break. Hi, we're back talking with Abe Lee, and we're talking about foreclosures today. And right before the break, we were finishing up on judicial foreclosures, and I think Abe had a few more points to make on judicial foreclosures.
Okay. Let's say the judge then says, okay, the highest bid is now 500,000, and the successful bidder has a $50,000 cashier's check. The judge will then say, you need to close in the next 30 days. So let's say I'm the debtor and I'm still in the house, and I know it's been auctioned off. So the commissioner will call me up and say, hey, your house has been sold for whatever, and you need to move out. I can choose to stay, or I can choose to move out. The commissioner's job is not to kick me out. Commissioner's job was to get a successful bid going. So let's say I don't move out, and one of the bidder paid cash for it, the deal. When he takes title, the commissioner signs a deed, not me, because the officer of the court has an official authorization to sign the deed. So the debtor, me, cannot sign the deed. The commissioner does. So the new owner, comes to my house and says, hey, how come you're still here? I say, I'm not moving. You have to take me out legally or illegally. Well, it's not an eviction notice anymore. It's an ejection notice, because eviction is for landlord-tenant code issues. Ejection is when I'm there illegally. So the new buyer can kick me out forcefully, illegally, physically, or he can then go to court and get the sheriff to kick me out, which might take another few months. So let's say when I know my days are numbered and I move out, but let's say during that time I take everything with me. The kitchen sink, the cabinets, carpets, fixtures, you name it, I take it with me, and the new buyer is stuck. Let's say I move out before the new buyer takes title to the property, and he's going for a bank loan. And before I leave, I smash the house with sledgehammer. And it's happened, by the way. And I've taken everything with me. So the appraiser comes in because the buyer's getting a loan. The appraiser goes in and says, hey, this is uninhabitable. Nothing's here. Abe's taken everything. So the appraiser will call the buyer will call the commissioner, and commissioner will say, hey, it wasn't subject to inspection. It wasn't subject to a loan. So you either close or you lose your 10%. So that's the danger of buying a foreclosed property, is because, I mean, it depends on what the debtor is going to do to the condition of the house. Okay.
What if it goes to the courts? So there was a bidder.
Yeah.
You go into the confirmation. At the confirmation, the owner, current owner, can he make up the payments,
Yes.
or is it too late? Oh, really?
Up to the date of court confirmation hearing, I believe the debtor can make up the back payments, and hopefully you're okay.
But what if after the confirmation, the 5% bidder wins it?
After the court confirmation hearing,
Because the deeds and stuff
it's
still
over.
haven't been signed. Oh,
No,
really?
but I think it's over at that
Okay.
point. I'm not sure, but I believe it is. So it has to be before the court confirmation hearing. It'd be better if it was before the courthouse auction.
Yeah.
But I believe that the debtor still has a right to make up the back payments. Now, once the new buyer has taken the deed or signed over the
late.
property, it's too late. And in Hawaii, we have what we call no right of redemption. In some states, the debtor has a year to go back and make all the back payments and get the property back.
Even after someone's already bought it.
Right. But in Hawaii, there's no right of redemption. Now, the only right of redemption is if your property is foreclosed because you didn't pay the property taxes. If you didn't pay the real property taxes, then the buyer or the new owner should wait a year to make sure that they don't do any improvements to the house or build a house on the vacant land, because the debtor could come back, make the back payments, plus 12% interest, and they now can take over the title.
That's
to the
rare, though,
property.
for the property tax not to be paid, though, because obviously property tax is
That's true.
a lot cheaper than the mortgage.
On Oahu, we don't have too many real property tax foreclosures, but if you go to the Big Island, where they have all those volcano land, oh man, you should see the list of foreclosures, because they're not paying the property tax. So they got tons of those once a year. They have the property tax foreclosure auctions.
Okay, so the current owner can, up until the confirmation,
I believe so.
yeah,
Right.
do all the payments, but then he's probably have to pay all the commissioner fees.
Court
and-
costs and everything back, right? Legal fees,
Well, what do you
etc.
do? Contact the bank, saying, "Hey, I got
No,
the
I
money."
think he has to go to the court system at that. He probably will go to the commissioner, because it's a judicial foreclosure. So the commissioner will be told, hey, look, I got my back payments. Then the commissioner will talk to the bank, and the bank probably will accept it. and then the debtor will have his house back. Now, when the commissioner signs off on the deed, all previous mortgages are extinguished.
Okay.
If there was a first, second, third mortgage, any debts that were held against that property, they're gone.
Okay.
The new buyer comes in with a clean title.
Okay. Okay, we'll be back and we'll talk about non-judicial foreclosures.
Abe, can you tell us about non-judicial
Sure.
foreclosures?
We talked about judicial foreclosures in the past segment, but in non-judicial, after the first or second month of non-payment, the courts, the banks decide, you know what, we're not going through a judicial foreclosure process because it takes time and it costs money. They have to hire an attorney, they have to go to court, they have to pay a commissioner, and it takes much longer, maybe 8 months to a year to do a judicial foreclosure process. But in a non-judicial, they can go to auction probably in the second or third month of default. So if you look in the Sunday paper, usually Star Bulletin or Advertiser, you see classified ads in the real estate section that shows the foreclosure auctions. If you see power of sale foreclosures at the heading, it is a non-judicial foreclosure. If you see a commissioner listed at the bottom of the page or the ad, it is always a judicial foreclosure. That's how you can tell whether it's judicial or non-judicial. Power of sale, it's non-judicial. Commissioner, it's judicial. So let's say Countrywide or some mainland bank owns the mortgage. Then what will happen is the bank will usually, as a standard policy, use non-judicial process rather than judicial because it's faster. So nationally, because there's so many foreclosures going on, they just find it much faster and easier to go through a non-judicial. Oh, by the way, in a judicial, if there's a deficiency, like I owed $500,000 and it sold for $400,000, the $100,000 differential is called the deficiency. The banks could come after me in a judicial for that deficiency. But in a non-judicial, if there's a deficiency, the banks cannot come after you. As far as I know, the law was passed several years back that in a non-judicial foreclosure, there is no deficiency judgment. So it's much better for the debtor to go through a non-judicial foreclosure than a judicial, especially if they have other assets.
I see.
Or if they have income coming in.
Would that be considered a form of income, that $100,000 that was forgiven? Or
Yes, and there was a new tax law that passed that says that if you earn less than $100,000 or something a year, then that deficiency that was forgiven is usually a taxable event. But the IRS said, we're not going to collect from you.
Oh, I
But
see.
if you're wealthier, they collect.
I see.
If you're not as wealthy, they won't collect.
Huh.
And that law passed several years ago. You should check with their accountant on that one. So in a non-judicial, they run the ad. Usually they don't have an open house. And then they'll have the courthouse auction at noon, just like the judicial, except there's only one auction.
Oh,
And that's it. And usually no one comes to the bid because there was no open house. And the reason they don't have open houses is because the bank employee or the attorney representing the bank may not want to have an open house.
I see.
So is it the same process, like non-judicial, the bank decides to go through that route? They have someone come over to your house saying, hey, Simon, we're going to foreclose on you.
Yes. No. You don't have to have someone serve you a notice.
They're just sending you a notice. The
Yeah.
bank's sending you a notice, hey, we're going to foreclose. You missed a
Correct.
couple months payments, we're going to foreclose on you.
We had a client that went through that process just recently. And the attorney representing the bank, I think it was a mainland lender, sent the letter. My client called the attorney and asked for a callback, never got a callback. And they had the auction, I think, this past week.
Wow.
So they asked me, what do I do? I said, well, if you don't want the deficiency judgment, I think you better sign the deed over. Because in a non-judicial, the debtor has to sign the deed. In a judicial, the commissioner signs the deed. So what if the debtor says, I don't want to sign?
Yeah.
Then they go through judicial foreclosure. But there might be a deficiency judgment. In this case of my client, they bought it for $695,000, nothing down,
Okay.
and they tried to short sell the thing for $510,000.
Wow.
Couldn't sell.
Wow.
So the bank is going to lose close to $200,000,
And that was non-judicial.
non-judicial.
Okay.
Do you, at the auction for the non-judicial, do you have to come up with the full amount of the bid price?
Sure. In the old law, there was no minimum. Like in the judicial, you can only ask for 10% down.
Yeah.
That's by law. In the non-judicial, there was no limit. So the bank could say, I want 100% down. And they used to ask for it. But there's a new law that just passed that says even in non-judicial foreclosures, the banks can only ask for 10% down. But think about this. You didn't see the house.
Right.
Yeah.
They have an auction. You got to put 10% down. you're bidding on something you never saw. So most of the time, the banks would take the property back.
And the owner is still living there, correct?
Yes, or they could have moved out.
Yeah.
In the case of our clients, they already moved out, or they were going to move out that week because they found another place. And I said, well, you could stay longer because really the whole process hasn't gone through yet. But he says, no, we found a good place, and we think we'll move. So, and they did it peacefully, and they made a nice comment. It says, we want the next homeowner to enjoy the home as much as we did, so we're not going to trash the place.
Okay.
We're going to leave it in clean condition, which was very nice of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in a non-judicial,
Okay, we'll be right back after these messages. So Abe, if someone's looking to buy foreclosures, because now with the foreclosures being increasing and you're seeing all these foreclosure workshops, people interested in buying foreclosures, any suggestions?
yes, I would recommend that you go to a foreclosure seminar. And there's several in town. I teach one, and it's open to the public as well as to the realtors, and there's others that offer the foreclosure seminar. But the key is you have to do your homework. I had one student of mine in a real estate class. It was really funny. He says, sometimes you make money in foreclosure, sometimes you lose money. I said, how did you lose money? He goes, when I was bidding on this property, this guy gave me stink eye. So I said, okay, I'm going to beat you. So they bid it up so high, it was above his price that he was wanting to bid on. And he says, I lost money on that one.
Oh.
So I said, well, why'd you get mad at the guy? Because he gave me stink eye. So you have to be very cold and, keep your calm, okay? Once you decide what your price is, don't go above it.
Yeah.
You cannot go beyond that because otherwise we have what we call a bidding frenzy, and that's what people want. They want people to bid it up, okay? So what I would say, be careful of how much you're going to pay for it. That's one. Second, is the debtor really going to move out?
Yeah.
Because if they move and they trash the place, then, you've lost the place. In fact, there was one guy, he trashed the house so badly, they had to tear the house down.
Wow.
It was that badly destroyed. And that's criminal,
Yeah.
but who's going to go after him?
Yeah.
Right.
Somebody's got to go after that guy. So that's the only concern I would have. The other thing is, if you look in the Sunday paper, especially Star Bulletin, there's very few foreclosures for auction now. And in my class, one of my students was a foreclosure commissioner. So I said, how many assignments did you get this year? She goes, none. So she's had none in the first half of the year. I said, when it was really busy with foreclosures, how many did you have? She said, usually one a month, so 12 a year.
Yeah.
So there's the differential. So when people say, I'm waiting for the bottom to fall out so I can buy stuff, I don't think the bottom's going to fall out. Or it's going to short sale, which we can talk about a little later. So the foreclosure market, yes, we're having pending foreclosures, but we're seeing more short sales and less foreclosures. So if you look in the paper, in fact, one of my students said, I was looking online. I said, how many foreclosure ads were there? He said, about 10. I said, well, in the heyday, we had 2 full pages. That'd be like 40.
Yeah.
So we're talking about, 3/4 drop. So people say we're going to have lots of foreclosures. I don't believe so. I think we're going to see more short sales.
So, okay, what's the short sale?
Okay. I owe $500,000 to the bank. I'm only can sell it for $400,000. I go to the bank and say, look, I'm destitute. I lost my job. Here's my pay stubs. Here's my pink slip, whatever. And if the bank says, since you're destitute and the value of the home dropped, we'll accept the $400,000 sales price, find us a buyer. So you hire your favorite realtor and get the house sold at $400,000, say. You take all the documents to the bank, like the pink slip and the W-2s, the 1099s or bank statements, whatever you got, and put it in a package and give it to the bank. If the bank sees that you're really bad off, they'll accept that $400,000. They took a hit for $100,000. That's a short sale because they're short $100,000.
Right.
And you have to make sure you sell the home. And if you don't sell the home, that leads to foreclosure.
Then it goes to foreclosure, right? So you got to do the short sale fairly early in the game.
Because you still need to make your payments.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and see, a lot of people say don't make the payments.
Which goes into foreclosure.
Yes. Then automatically it's going to go into
Yeah.
foreclosure. So they're going to start the process, and you're going to try and do the short sale. So it's like beating the water
Right.
when the dam breaks
Yeah.
and hoping you get out. And so you really do need to make sure that you deal with a professional that's familiar with the short sale process, can sell the home at what I call a reasonable price. And it's like that other client of mine, $695,000 purchase, $510,000 couldn't sell it, and going through a non-judicial foreclosure. So the bank gets it back. What are they going to sell it for?
Yeah.
Right.
Probably $475,
Yeah.
I see.
$450. So the bank's now taking it on a shorts for $200,000 loss. So it's a pretty bad time for a lot of people.
I think the key too, though, is you have to get permission from the bank to do a short sale. You can't just say, "Hey, we want to do a short sale,"
Correct.
and start the process.
Well, even if you got an offer, the bank has to approve the
Yeah,
short.
yeah.
And so eventually you will have to talk to the bank. So what we recommend is talk to the bank, tell them you're in trouble, can we do a short sale? And usually they'll say yes. Because in Vegas, they have short sales of 50% now. You know, $400,000 property is now selling for $200,000. And a friend of mine just told me, we're busy.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's all the time we have. I want to thank Abe for coming on our show today. I'm Scott Sakata.
I'm Jeff Orrig.
See you next time.